Hi and welcome to this video, which is just about changing the oil and filter on my 2007 Ford Focus, which has got the 1.6 petrol engine in. Now I haven't got an under tray on mine, so you may actually have an under tray. It's normally fitted, mine isn't, so you may need to remove that using a 10mm socket, but apart from that it should all be the same. So hopefully you'll find this video useful, and if you could like and subscribe to my channel, that's much appreciated, and as always, have a good weekend.
So the first thing to do is jack up the vehicle and make safe with axle stands. So you probably could jack up the car from the front, but obviously for cameras and access like that it's better to do it from the side. So I'm going to use two jacks here, one each side. I mean, you do have a front subframe there that probably would handle a trolley jack. But anyway, so there's like cutouts on the plastic part to show where the head of the jack should go. Now, the axle stands obviously are very important, especially if the seals can be quite rusty on these cars, and it wouldn't take much for the head of the jack to actually sink into the sill, which is what was happening when I first bought this car. So thankfully I've now mended it, so it should be okay. But there we go, so that's the vehicle now safe. So we can now proceed onto draining the oil. So I'll just include a couple of photos to show where the oil drain plug is. There it is, it's actually at the rear of the engine. So what we need for that is a 13mm socket, like the one there, and obviously some sort of breaker bar. In my case it definitely needed a breaker bar. And as always, put a pair of gloves on, because engine oil is quite bad for the skin, especially with the chemicals that are in it. So anyway, let's get on and drain this. So mine was really tight, but my car, as you can see, my car was sort of left sitting for about 3 years, so I had to sort of repair it all, because it was sort of like an abandoned car. I'd actually done a whole series on that on the channel. But anyway, so what I'm going to do now is just filter this oil. There's a metal gauze filter in there, because I just want to check no metal particles come out or anything sort of nasty that I'm not aware of. And it all looks clear, which is good news. I mean, the car actually only did sort of, I think they drove it about 2,000 or 3,000 miles a year. So it should be okay. But anyway, now we've got the oil out, we can pop the sump plug back in and torque that to 28 Newton meters. Now you do need to check the O-ring on there, because these sump plugs actually have like a built-in O-ring, and if it's squashed too much it may not actually seal too well. So it might be just a bit worth being aware of that. There we go, that's our 28. I've got quite a rusty bar there underneath the radiator. I think I might need to change that next. Doesn't look too good. Obviously just wipe the oil off there, and then that's that part done. So the next thing we can go on to is removing the oil filter. And again, I'll show a couple of photos here. So this is actually the new filter, because the old one was again quite stuck. So I'm going to use one of these tools, which is sort of like a self-gripping 3-pronged device. You can obviously get the fluted ones, which are, but obviously they're specific to each filter. Anyway, we'll have a go at this. This is quite tight.
Oh, that's tight.
Yeah, that, as you can see, part of the front brackets just fell into the oil pan there. So I actually forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, you do need the engine actually hot so that the oil is nice and thin and will just drain out and flush any perhaps bits of sludge and that with it as it comes out. So there we go, that's the old filter off, and then we can put a new one on. Now one thing about the Ford is at least the parts are actually cheap, and a genuine Ford filter was only about £8. So I'll get my new filter, and as always I like to put a little bit of oil on the rubber seal before fitting it. Now some people talk about pre-filling the filter. Now the only problem with that is technically you would need to pre-fill it from the outside, because if you put oil straight in the middle, that part would bypass the filter material, and in theory if you've got a bit of grit in there or something, that could go straight to the crankshaft bearings, which would be quite disastrous. So there are two schools of thought there on pre-filling the oil filters. But anyway, so our filter's on there now, and we'll just do that hand tight like so. Just check it again, and then as always I collect all the oil into the old 5 litre washer fluid containers, and then I can take that down to the local council tip for correct recycling. So now we've done that part, we can just remove the axle stands, drop the car back down, and then refill it. Obviously if you've got the under tray, you would have obviously refitted that under tray before doing this. Okay then, so now to refilling the oil, and this one takes about 4.1 litres. So again, a couple of photos here. So there's the oil filler cap and the oil level dipstick, because obviously you should check the oil level once you've put the oil in. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts, because I buy my oil in 20 litre containers and I sort of pump it out into a jug. So there's 2 litres there. So I'll just pop that in, and then I'll just go back up into the loft as it were and get another 2.1 litres like so. Leave that to drain in, and then we can just put our cap back on, leave that to drain down a bit, and then obviously check the dipstick, make sure it's at the correct level. But there we are, so that's the oil and filter done now on this Ford Focus. So I'll just check that the oil warning lamp goes out now. It looks like the little can there on the left hand side, it's still on at the moment. There we go, and that's just gone out. And then I just note the mileage, which is 117,000 miles. So anyway, here's some torque and other data here on the oil change, and the usual reference photographs which you can pause to view for longer. So obviously just got some here of the engine bay, showing that oil level dipstick, close up there of the top of the engine and the dipstick, and some of my rust. And there we are, there's the underneath, which is actually looking a lot better than it did when I picked the car up at the beginning of the year. So obviously I've just got to change that bracket there underneath the radiator. So here's a close-up of this sump plug, so you can actually see the rubber washer. And here's the Ford filter, and I also measured that so you can see the diameter of it as well. Okay then, so that now concludes the end of this video. So you've been watching how to do an oil and filter change on a Mk2 petrol 1.6 Ford Focus. And thank you for watching and supporting my channel, and please like and subscribe. And this video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in July 2023, and I can also be found on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, which is now X I believe, as Coats and Gators.